Yeah, I think I'm running solo today, so I had to get a little creative.
You are creative and very good, Mr. Blair.
Need to learn to turn my mic off.
Oh.
There, okay, it's not on. Can I use this one too, or as well, or instead?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay. Sorry about all that racket. We'll get started with the Public Service Committee for October 22nd. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We need to take the roll.
Caius?
Caius present.
Allen? Hernandez? Gopi? Silva?
Here.
Starrett?
Starrett present.
Shefflow present. Is that a quorum? We have no one from the committee that's here. In person, I need a motion to approve the minutes from September 17th.
So moved. This is Dr. Silva.
Caius second.
Silva moves, Kaya seconds. Unless there's any comments or questions or changes, the clerk will call the roll.
Allen? Hernandez? Caius,
Caius, yes.
Gopi, Silva,
Yes.
Sterrett,
Starrett, yes.
Sheffield, yes. Do we have anybody from finance on the phone? Okay. So as usual, we're not getting direct reports. You have any comments or questions, you need to contact the finance department directly. And recorder of deeds. Do we, no, he's treasurer. Is anybody from the recorder's office online? No? None? So you have those reports. If anybody has any comments or questions on the recorder's reports. I only noticed that the activity is up year to date and year over year or month over month. And the treasurer.
Good morning. This is Maria Herrera for Mr. Rickard. You have the reports in front of you, and I just wanted to highlight on page 23 our activity up to date, how the e-check practically doubled in our collection this year, which is we're very pleased with that. Hopefully, people will remember that they paid online and continue to do so in the future. E-check is free, so that's awesome. As far as our tax sale at this point, we would have had it next Monday, but it has been suspended at this point, postponed. So we're waiting to see what happens due to COVID. And that's all for us at this point. Our collections are just a quarter of point down from last year. So we're at 99.03% overall.
Oh, okay. So on page 25 was some sort of, it says Knox County. I don't know if that was just a typo. Is it where this actually, yeah. So that's been replaced. They sent around a separate form, but you wouldn't have access to Knox County or?
Not at all.
Or did that come from the sales agent?
That comes from the trustee, from a tax agent.
Okay. So, in the tax sale, as I understand it, I spoke to Mr. Rickert, is suspended, so they're not going to sale. We don't have a room and a location large enough to handle all of the tax buyers.
Correct.
No new date set.
Correct.
I don't know if we're waiting for phase 5 or.
Well, limitations in how many people can be in a room at this point.
But we will, let's see, so those, do you know how much money would typically be raised by that tax
Yes.
sale?
Overall, it would be around $6 million.
6 million, okay. And that's for all the taxing districts,
Correct.
so.
Some of them are 100% collected at this point.
So probably in the scheme of things, we collect a trillion or?
1,300,000,000.
Okay, billion. So in the scheme of things, maybe it's not,
99% collected is pretty good.
Yeah. but eventually we'll have to.
We'll have to catch up to that, yes.
And the taxpayer, that's giving them more time to just walk into your office and pay.
Correct.
Right.
They are still accruing penalty at 1.5% per month
Okay.
until paid.
Okay. Supervisor of Assessments, unless anybody else has any comments or questions on the phone, sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Caius.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand how the Knox County information is in our report, and it got there how and has been addressed how?
Right, it was submitted to us by the tax agent in error, but that has been corrected. We can email or send it to the board and
It was
have it dropped
emailed
off.
around, at least I got it. I don't know if other people got it. So these tax agents are in the business of selling these sort of oddball surplus parcels. A lot of them are 2-foot strips or 10-foot triangles that don't get paid. Tax buyers don't buy them. And so they end up in the county's ownership. I don't know if we own them. Do we own them?
We don't know.
And so these tax agents are in this business, and they probably do it for the whole state, or,
Pretty much most of the state, they do business with most of the state.
yeah. So they must have just emailed the wrong report.
Got the wrong K County.
Right, exactly. Autocorrect or something.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. And the supervisor.
Good morning. This is Holly Winter in for Mark Armstrong, who is taking classes this week. His report is in the packet. I do want to note that all townships have had their filing deadline, and we are fully scheduled out through the first part of December. So we'll be having hearings through then, which is kind of early for us to complete those.
I asked whether he was coming because it was noticeably quiet in the room this morning when I got here, and usually he's filling it with. No personality in the room. Yeah, yes, total void of personality. And so his report indicates that the people contesting the valuation of their property is dramatically down, like more than 50% or,
Yeah, like 41%, I think,
yeah.
over the last quad. So,
Uh,
yeah, we have had fewer hearings. We are doing all hearings either by non-appearance or teleconference. So there is no public in our building as of yet.
I suppose COVID just keeps people from, I mean, it could be that it's the accuracy of the assessments, but I think more likely it's just that it's just not the year to make the contest because.
Yeah, it's not a quad. So
Yeah.
usually on the quads, they do a little more revaluing than what they do on the non-quads. So the ones, most of them just took the factor this year. So.
Yeah. Okay, anybody have any other
Mr. Chairman?
guys?
Yeah, I know Mike Belak was at the township meeting last night. He'd mentioned there was some requirement of the requirement for them to possibly travel to Springfield for hearings. And that was going to complicate the issues of continuing the hearings.
So, right, that's through the Property Tax Appeal Board. So that's one step after the Board of Review. The Property Tax Appeal Board had sent us an email and said, all of these cases, and they listed a whole bunch of cases, need to be heard, and they will be heard down in Springfield. That was supposed to take place next week, but as far as I know, they have pushed that off now until January. What they're hoping is that the board and the appellants can come to an agreement so that there isn't a need for a hearing down in Springfield. But Springfield will not travel to each of the individual counties like they usually do.
And I'm assuming that's because of COVID?
Yes, yes.
So can you explain that to me? Are these are appeals of the Board of Review's decision?
Correct. And these cases that they're talking about are from the year 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. So these are previous years' hearings that haven't been solved yet.
Kind of like complex commercial cases?
Most of them are commercial, yeah.
Because it's too early for Board of Review, or I mean, we haven't even done our Board of Review. So these will get appealed sometime after.
Correct. They have 30 days from the date of the notice of findings to appeal to the Property Tax Appeal Board.
So, Mr. Kais, were they talking about the township officials had to travel? That,
I believe so.
Yeah.
okay.
Usually what happens at the Property Tax Appeal Board, they usually come up to our office and they have a hearing officer. The board member who's representing that case for the board is there, as well as any appraisers, the appellant, and the township assessor if they want to have a say in that hearing.
Okay, I didn't know how that process worked. Anything else? If not, we'll move on to the ROE. There's maybe a button on that mic there.
That better?
That's better.
Good morning. Phil Morris from the Regional Office of Education, Director of Operations and Technology. This morning, Pat is meeting with the superintendents right now from all the school districts. It's obviously a very fluid time, and they are meeting very regularly. But today we're here. It is our duty every year to produce an annual report of our operations and detailing all the different activities that we've done during the year. So Molly McQueenie, our communications website coordinator, has just passed that out to you. It's available now on our website, knroe.org. And then we're also going to be getting a copy to all the county board members individually who are online and not attending today. So that would be the report for today.
Okay, thank you. So you put them in the box or?
Yeah, we'll be getting a copy over from our office to the county board.
Any comments on the in-school or in-person remote learning process or?
As I said, it's very fluid.
Yeah.
But I will tell you right now, everybody's staying with what's going on right now. So
They're closing the bars and restaurants. You know, they left schools alone. I guess it's up to the district officials, what I heard, I think. Yeah. So yeah.
the districts have been in very well communicating, a lot of communication with the health department director. And so.
Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments here or online? Hearing none. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you much.
And County Clerk.
Good morning. You have a copy of our report. In terms of the financials, we're pretty close to where we were last year. If anyone has any questions on that. Otherwise, I think there's something going on right now. If you turn on the news, if that's what you have questions about. Are there any questions on the report, or I know you have some other things on the agenda? So
yeah, no, I was just going to notice the deaths are. It looked like they were dipping in August, total county deaths, but they've kind of gone above the trend line in September. And however, marriages have tanked or did tank in April, and I hadn't really looked at that closely. In May, they're coming back, but just gonna comment on that. So we do have election issues as a separate agenda item. So
Chair Shefflow?
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It's Starrett. With regards to the marriages, yes, they have, the numbers have gone down, but it has been very difficult for people who wanted to get married, obviously. And then also they've tried through the court systems as well, even if they were just going to do that. But I think there hasn't been a lot of information out there with regards to that. And I did some digging for some constituents and found that they were still having people, but they didn't realize it, into the courthouse, like on 6th Street, but people were unaware of that. So I think they've just begun to start to take advantage of that. But who knows how long that will go now, since we're kind of going into a shutdown mode. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was at the clerk's office waiting to get in. I don't remember why I was there. Maybe it was the day I was taking the tour of the voting equipment. And off in the distance, I saw this man standing by a car, and it looked like they were changing money. And car kind of drove off, and the man came walking around. He had a black robe on. And then he came in and got in the line that I was in, and it was Judge Stamfa. And he's performing weddings, and that couple was disabled, or one of them was disabled, so they didn't get out of the car. So he married them sitting in their car at the end of the parking lot. At this point, he had taken his robe off. And he said it's something he's been doing because there was difficulty getting or people finding a judge to perform the ceremony. So he's been doing them in Kane and DuPage, I think. And it was interesting, how things are not always as they seem, as you're looking at what you see down at the end of the road or whatever.
Well, the clerk's office is continuing to issue the licenses. The issue right now is the courthouse that has not doing the wedding ceremonies as they normally do. That's been stopped since March. So we continue to get updates from the 16th Circuit of when they'll be open, and we let our constituents know, but they're still getting licenses because that's still allowed.
So Ms. Sterrett, were you saying the 3rd Street Courthouse is open, or?
Yes, that is what I've been told. Now, of course, with everything changing tomorrow, I'm not sure, but they were doing it by appointments is what I was told. And then also, if I may comment, when you said that you had seen the new voting information or the new voting machinery and everything else, it's very impressive, I think.
Right. Yep.
And I think the clerk's office is doing a terrific job there with really trying to make sure that every vote is getting counted and properly and in time. So just wanted to mention that I was quite impressed by it.
Yeah, the machine is fun to watch. So unless there's something else, we'll move on to other business. So we're going to talk about the election process. We have state's attorney here to talk about the voter hotline. We have the chairman here who's been requesting information on the security process in the voting process. So I did tour with Jack and saw that voting machine, and I think it's 600 ballots per second or per minute. 600 envelopes per minute, give or take?
For the inbound processing or the outbound?
The inbound, the opening and the scanning of the signatures, and
Probably a little faster than that, but yeah, that's a good number.
it's very fast. But it is just one small cog in the process, and the ballots, and maybe I mentioned this in a county board meeting, that from that machine, they go to another room, which I didn't go in because for whatever reason, where they are then processed for tabulation. So anyway, the voter delivers them to the post office. The post office, local post office, does something with them. They send them to the regional post office. They send them back to the individual, to the Geneva post office, I'm suspecting. And then somebody, I don't know whether the county picks up its mail from the post office. Maybe, I don't know if, maybe do you know this? Okay. So I know a lot of institutions pick up their mail from the post office. They don't have the mailman bring it out. So then somebody has to sort that mail, put it into this machine, and so it's I think that's the process. And then how many people are carrying it to the machine, how many people are carrying it away from that machine, and so on. So I think that's the question. I don't know if you want to address that or if Mr. Lawson has questions. Please.
Okay. Would it be appropriate then under other business to go to
Yes, we're on other business.
election process discussion? At other meetings, it's been requested for not only board members, but also our constituents. And I would think that it would be a good template. And it's possible that it's already one of these has been devised. But because it's so confusing to most of us, and certainly the people who we serve, a flow chart of how the process works in all of its combinations, and then where are the crucial security points? Has that been done so that it can be communicated across all of our folks? So may I ask Brian to answer that?
I think he's got a handout.
Oh, that's super.
Thank you. So this will be just a low-tech version. We'll have some multimedia here to show it rather than putting it in every step, but just the step-by-step process. If you want to move ahead, Blair, thank you. As you know, this is not the first time that Kane County voters have voted by mail. The clerk's office has processed vote by mail ballots in the last election in March, in every election for years going on, and it's the same method of voting that's been used for many years. Blair, if you could get that CBS video. Sorry, we'll flip back and forth. Basically, if you've not seen it, CBS 2 Chicago, NBC 5 Chicago, ABC 7 Chicago have been out to Kane County multiple times. This is actually one that just came out yesterday. The Tribune, the Daily Herald, the Chronicle have all been out. They've had videos showing the process and the explanations. Here's a recent one. If you could hit that, please.
This election is also setting records for mail-in ballots, and that means record postal costs.
Many election boards pick up that tab for return postage, but CBS 2 political investigator Dana Kozlov found out not all do, leaving voters to put a stamp on it.
This mail folding machine may have cost Kane County's clerk $15,000. But Jack Cunningham says ultimately it's helping save taxpayers way more than that on ballot mailing costs, in part because of a little trick Cunningham discovered.
Previously, they were folding them once, like this, and putting an envelope.
Which cost $1.60 a ballot to mail. But by making a second fold,
half price,
Cunningham says it cut postage down to just 44 cents a pop. So how much do you think, again, you saved the county?
We'll save approximately $160,000 to $200,000.
That's a lot of money, especially considering Kane is one of many collar counties that doesn't require voters pay postage. But three area counties, McHenry, Lake, and Kankakee, do, which state election officials say costs about $1.40 per ballot.
In the background, while they were showing the clip, you were seeing the inserter put together the ballots, and they were coming out in the complete envelopes. We'll have some more on that later. So the first step, if we go back to the PowerPoint, sorry, jump around. The voter completes an application for a vote by mail ballot. There are three ways that a voter can complete that application. The voter can complete the application online. We promoted that. That's the easiest method because the voters entering the data, there's less opportunity for human error of the clerk's staff not reading the letters right, or if someone's handwriting is not great. When it's entered online, it's verified through our voter verification system, the database, and the application is completed then. But we also have opportunities for the voter to request an application by calling our office or coming into the office in person. And at that point, the voter completes the application, signs it, dates it, and mails it back to the clerk's office. A couple side notes about this election. Per state law that was enacted earlier this year, the clerk's office was required to mail vote by mail applications to approximately 211,000 registered voters in Kane County who have voted in recent elections. Those applications from our office were only sent to registered voters because only registered voters are in our database and could get that information. Also keep in mind that state law permits candidates, political parties, third-party organizations, and others to mail solicited or unsolicited vote by mail applications to anyone. So when you've heard that people who didn't request them, or unregistered voters, or people who are no longer living in an address could have received one, these organizations could be using other mailing lists and not registered voter mailing lists. People can buy a mailing list from, a commercial company, can mail out to every address. Those are not coming from the clerk's office. The clerk's office has proposed legislation to streamline this process and also to require any outside groups that send vote by mail ballot applications that they must be pre-addressed with a return envelope to the clerk's office, so that these organizations aren't just hoarding these ballots and people, or not ballots, check that, applications, and voters don't know that this was some other organization that took them. So we've proposed it, we've put it out there. The legislature didn't act on it this year. So that's step one. And when you're talking about security, the security checkpoints are in the voter registration database, that only those people who are registered get them, and they're checked. So in addition to when that application comes in, we have staff verifying it, and then they're verifying it in the system. Step two, go ahead, Blair. The voter's ballot is created. So vote by mail ballots, just like an in-person ballot, is personalized to the registered voter's registered address, and only include the voting districts for that address. So that whether your ballot is created when you go to vote in person or early, or you request your ballot, it's tied to that voter registration address, so that my ballot doesn't have an Elgin race on it, or doesn't have a race in another area. When a vote by mail application has been completed, the voter's ballot is printed according to the information in that database. This ensures that only registered voters can receive a ballot, because our system cannot print out a ballot for someone who's not registered to vote. Next step, next slide. The outbound process. This is how the voter's ballot is assembled. You saw a little bit in the video there, that process of taking all the information, all the little pieces, to put it in the envelope that comes to your house. The clerk's office purchased 2 pieces of equipment that have automated the ballot assembly process. The first is the paper folding machine. We saw that in the clip from CBS 2. By making that extra fold on our ballot and removing an extraneous and often confusing second envelope, the clerk's office, through the efficiencies Mr. Cunningham explained, is saving about $1.22 in postage each way. So far, I'm looking at today's numbers of about 95,000 ballots that have gone out. And then of the, let's see where we're at, about 57,000 ballots that have come back. We're looking at, actually, we're probably over $160,000 now in savings from that one efficiency. The other piece of equipment is the inserting machine. So the inserter, as we call it, takes the ballot, the instructions, the affidavits, the return envelope, the mailing envelope, and assembles them together. In the old days, it was manual. You had your assembly line, you had staff putting it all together. This process automates it. At the end of the line, it prints the voter's name and address and the barcode on the mailing envelope, and then seals the envelope. The machine can average around 7,000 vote by mail packets per hour. So when we had that initial onslaught of about 80,000 requests, we'll talk about numbers in terms of savings, but you can imagine how long that would have taken if it were done by humans. The ballot packages are put together in the automated assembly line. The ballot packages are measured for thickness and weight, and packages are rejected. Packages that are rejected are flagged and dropped into a little slot. The machine also has a quality control function, and it pops out random ballots. Usually it's about every 50 for us to review to make sure that they were done correctly. The inserter is connected to the clerk's voter registration database. The printer can only print names and addresses from the voter registration database. The voter's address must match the specific ballot style tied to the voter's registration address. This security measure prevents unregistered voters from accidentally receiving a ballot. So again, if you're not registered, you're not in the system, the printer can't print a ballot for you, can't print your address on a ballot envelope, it can't go out. Finally, before the ballot envelope is mailed to the voter, it's scanned in the sorting machine, more on that in a moment, which is also tied to the voter registration database. The vote by mail ballot attached to that voter is then entered into the system, so the database will indicate that the voters requested a ballot. So if that voter attempts to vote in person, when you show up, the poll book will show to the election judge that that voter's requested a ballot and subsequently received it, depending on if, you just requested it yesterday, but if you requested it, before, it'll show that most likely the voters received it by now. And it also ties that packet to the specific voter for when it's completed and returned to the clerk's office. So when we go back to the security measures, it's alerting the election judges, hey, Brian requested a vote by mail ballot. He's trying to vote. What's going on here? Is he surrendering the ballot? On the other side, okay, we sent the ballot out to Brian, so it's in the system now, so we're waiting for it to be returned, and we'll scan it and go through the whole process when it comes back. Prior to purchasing the automation equipment, the inserter and the sorter, the entire process, so you're assembling it that we talked about, and then the outbound or the inbound, which we'll talk about in a second, would take approximately 15 to 20 minutes per ballot. So far, if you use 100,000 ballots at 4 an hour, that's 25,000 hours. We're looking at probably $500,000 in additional staff time that was saved through this equipment. Okay, step 4. This is the voter completing the ballot, the voter voting. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Voter completes it, signs it, dates it, puts it back in the envelope. And then step 5, the return process. So we've talked about the different ways voters can return their ballots. They can send it in the mail. Postage is already prepaid. They can bring it to one of the drop boxes in Aurora, Geneva, or Elgin. Those boxes are all inside. They're secured. When the buildings aren't open, the ballot boxes aren't accessible to the public. So you have that security, plus there are cameras on them in the buildings as well. Voters can obviously drop them off at the post office, and voters can drop them off at the clerk's office as well. We have obviously put all the information out there. People are aware of how to do it, and they still call and say, can I drop it off at the call center? Can I drop it off at the clerk's office? Can I drop it off in the box? What do I do? And our call centers handle that. By the way, if you haven't come over to the office and seen this operation, we mention this every month, you really should, but also come see the call center. And the way that Clerk Cunningham came up with the idea to streamline the process of when the calls come in, so that I'm not answering a call differently from the way you'd answer it if you were staff or another person would. The answers are standardized. All of the operators are answering the question so that everyone gets the same answer and we get the right answer the first time. Okay, on to step 6. The voter's ballot is scanned, sorted, and sliced. This process, Blair, if you could bring up the video. A couple of weeks ago on Meet the Press on NBC, there was a presentation by Neil Kelly, who's the Register of Voters in Orange County, one of the preeminent election minds in the country. Actually, when Jack was the president of the National Association of Recorders and Clerks, Neil was on his board, and he gave Jack the opportunity to network to all these clerks across the country. Well, Neil out in Orange County, it's one of the largest counties in the state, counties in the country, and NBC did a presentation on showing the whole equipment. They're in LA, so it's much easier for them to get national media for us. But do you want to play the NBC News one? Send that one yesterday. And this is a really good one. They have in Orange County, they have video studios. They can put out these things really fast, but they had NBC come in to show it. Roger responded on me.
So one of the things that I did right after the presidential primary because of COVID is buy new automation equipment so we could double our capacity. And we were really geared up in the March primary to handle about 1.2 million ballots. Now we can handle all 1.7 million if we had to. Wow. So what you're seeing here right now is this test material going through. It's the same thing we would be doing with live ballots, is sorting these ballots and preparing them for opening.
When a ballot gets here, what happens?
So when your ballot arrives, the first thing it does is go into this piece of equipment. And what this piece of equipment does at a very high speed is it's capturing your signature that you signed on the ballot itself. So it goes through this system to flatten it out, and then it goes into a pocket. So all we're doing is capturing your signature. Because what I need to do is to compare your signature to your original signature that's on file to make sure that this ballot is okay to open.
So a human is comparing the signature here?
Correct. Correct. A human being is comparing every single signature. I don't use software, and I think that's a better way to go.
What happens if your signature is not legitimate?
If your signature does not match, it goes to another tier for additional review. And if that team says it doesn't match, it goes to a final tier for review, and then we'll send a letter to the voter.
But if your signature is legit and it's approved, then where does this ballot go?
Then it comes right back through this piece of equipment again. We sort it down to the precinct level, so each individual precinct throughout Orange County. So if I have to do a recount after the election, I don't have to go back and sort all these again. And then it's also outsorted for good signatures and bad signatures. If it's a good ballot, it's then going to go to one of these stations over here. It comes into this machine here, and this will split the envelope open and allow the operator to take the ballot out without seeing the ballot.
To maintain that anonymity of the ballot.
Exactly. It maintains the secrecy of the ballot. So for instance, when it comes out, it's still folded. He would never see it, and it's separated from that envelope forever. You can never connect the two back together. So then at another station, we would open this up and prepare it for scanning so it's flat.
To count the votes.
To count the votes, exactly. And when it hits that team over there, they cannot connect a name with the ballot itself.
Because this is just your secret ballot, that is it.
That's correct. So what happens is, after that opening process is done and the ballot is flattened, this is the moment of truth, because now it comes in and we scan it and we're capturing all the data where the voter actually voted.
And how will it be different than past election?
It'll be twice as fast. And that's one of the things right in the spring that I realized we've got to get this under control to be prepared for it.
How long did it take you to get all this stuff set up?
What did that take us, 6 months, roughly?
So this is a very long, intensive process to get ready for the surge in vote by mail.
I mean, elections are complex, and the technology and the systems that are used, you cannot stand that up overnight. And you have to be very careful and diligent about what you're doing. So that's why we're taking extra pains to do this.
So all of this will happen starting in October.
Correct.
But none of the actual counting of the vote happens till
7:30 roughly on election night is when we start. And then I can't post anything until after 8 o'clock on election night. That's in state law.
So all the logistics first and the exciting stuff on election day.
Yeah, and this is really important because you don't want to know who the winners and losers are before election day. And so none of my team knows, and we don't know because we haven't tallied the votes yet. So you don't do that until election night.
It's a privilege to see it up close.
Yeah, and see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You guys have been working on this 24/7, anticipating what's to come. There are other counties across the country that don't have the resources, don't have the experiences you do. Do you see any red flags in other counties? You're talking to them.
Yeah, there's 3,000 counties across the country, so there's obviously a very diverse set of rules and election officials and how they handle this across the country. But that's the way the Constitution by our founding fathers was kind of set up for it to be dispersed like that. I think we're only as good as our weakest link, and as sophisticated as we are, I do my best to help colleagues around the country with best practices and information sharing to make sure that we have a solid system.
NBC News can help you figure out how to vote in the 2020 presidential election. We have a new state.
And he's great at that networking that he mentioned at the end there. A few points. We'll actually go through a step-by-step again, but I wanted you to see it in action if you haven't seen all the local TV stations doing it already. There are a few things that are different in California because of their laws. We can post after the polls close. So you'll start seeing our numbers after 7 o'clock, maybe 7:30-ish. He has to wait till 8 o'clock his time to post those things. Also, everything from the point that those ballots come back into the clerk's office possession, there are a group of bipartisan election judges that are witnessing everything. In California, they can use staff. When he mentions human beings to verify the signatures, they can use staff. We use election judges. So you have at least a Democrat, well, there's teams of 3, but representatives from the Democratic and Republican Party in every group that witnesses everything from the processing of them to the signature verification to every step in that process. But yes, basically that's a little bigger version because they process 1 million ballots versus what we do. And one advantage that we're gonna have that other counties around us that don't have this equipment have is we're gonna be ready. We are ready because of these 50-some thousand ballots that have come back, we're up to date. They've been processed, haven't been tabulated, haven't been counted, all that stuff they've talked about, but we're at the point where everything that's come in through yesterday has been processed and ready.
Tabulation occurs on the voting on election day?
Yes, okay. After the polls close. So
you tabulate between, let's say polls close at 7, then you hit a button and then okay.
Yeah. So thank you, Blair. Okay, step 6. The voter's ballot is scanned, sorted, and sliced. Some of this is going to be reviewed from what you saw, but just so that everyone's aware of all the steps. The return envelope with the completed mail ballot is run through the sorting machine. During the first pass, the envelope is scanned into the voter registration system and electronically time-stamped as having been received. The machine also takes a picture of the voter's signature on the back of the envelope. That signature is then compared to the voter specimen signature in the voter database, which is done by election judges. We'll get to that next step in a second. On the second pass, the envelope is sliced so that the election judges can extract the ballot later, and the envelopes are sorted to the precinct level and put into batches. As Neil mentioned in the video, the sorter also rejects envelopes that have no signature or have some other error. On step 7, thank you, Blair. The voter signature is verified by a group of bipartisan election judges. So we have groups of 3 judges, and representatives from both parties are in those groups, and they review all signatures. They're all done by humans. The capability exists with the system to use automated verification software. We do it with election judges. They sit at a computer screen where the signature captures from the envelope are directly compared to the voter specimen signature. If the judges reject a signature as not matching, the voter is notified within 2 days and given the opportunity to cure the signature and explain why the ballot should not be rejected. Voters are also notified of any other reason for rejection. There was no signature or anything else, and they're given the same opportunities to cure the error. The curing process must be completed no later than 14 days after the election, which is also that period of that we have to wait for the ballots to come back and a few other things under statute. All signatures are verified by election judges, just as they are done for in-person voting. When you come to vote early or you vote in your precinct on election day, the judge verifies your signature as well. The difference in this case is for vote by mail ballots, the election judges reviewing signatures are just reviewing signatures. So they're focused just on that, not on, oh, someone not standing in line right, or do we have a problem with this or something else going on. Their focus is just the signatures rather than everything else going on. So again, another security precaution right there. Next step, the voter's ballot is extracted from the envelope. After the signature verification is completed and the accepted ballot envelopes are taken to a workstation with bipartisan election judges extracting the envelope from the ballots. As you saw in the video, that's how you maintain the secrecy of the ballot. That at that point, the envelope with that information is separated from the ballot, so there's no longer a tracking system. That ballot is secret. You don't know whose ballot it is. We've had that ballot go through the processing system, so it's registered as coming in. We have it, it's been tracked the whole process, and it comes back, and now at that point, it's ready to go be processed. Next step, the voter's ballot is scanned and processed in the ballot scanner. You saw a little bit of that in the video. In the presence of election judges from both parties, that ballot is then scanned into the ballot scanner and it's held until election night. No one knows what's happened. The ballots are not counted. They're not tallied. No individual, whether election judge or clerk staff, knows how a voter voted or has a tally of the votes. It's in state law. That doesn't happen, and the ballots are not tabulated or counted until after the polls close on election night. We say 7 p.m. I mean, hopefully we won't have to have anything extending the polls being open, but only at that point, which is step 10, is when the tabulation or the counting is done. And that's after the polls are closed. So the first results you'll see on election night will be the early votes that have come in. That's easy. And then the vote by mail ballots that have been processed and then become tabulated. So while other counties are busy doing this manually, it's been done here. So just to give you a quick update on numbers from as of the close of yesterday, 34,647 votes in person through early voting. Actually, the plus gray, so actually about 34,900 votes have been cast. And then vote by mail ballots that have come back, including our overseas and military, we are 57,400 at that point. So you've had about 92,000 ballots that have come back and votes, early votes have been in. Just to compare that, in 2016, if you included all of early voting, so early voting all the way till the day before the election, and the 9,400 vote by mail ballots that came in, we only had 82,000 votes that were cast before election day. And that was about 50% of the electorate voted before election day in 2016. At this point, we've had 92,000 votes already. So
What's the total anticipated vote or total registered? It's like 200.
Registered at about 305, 310. I mean, your guess is as good. If you get 70%, you're at about 210,000. If you're at that point, almost 50% are in already. But we've had incredibly strong early voting numbers as well, and those will continue over the next week and a half. So that's the step-by-step. I know the question earlier about mail, the county mailroom goes to pick up the mail from the post office, brings it back. That's county staff doing it. At that point, it in terms of chain of custody, it goes to the clerk's office, and election judges are there to review it from the moment it comes into the office, and then the processing happens.
Are those, is that the Daily Mail? It's like ballots and people ordering birth certificates, and it's just a mishmash of, do they have to sort the treasurer's mail and the assessor's mail?
Well, that stuff's done in the mailroom. The stuff that comes to the clerk's office then comes
to us. Okay. So it's just it's multiple bins of mail that come right over here, I think I've learned, in the mailroom.
Dave could probably tell you that.
Okay. What about the question about the, I didn't bring my daughter has a vote by mail ballot at home. And so how do you know when that's mailed in? It's not postmarked by the post office, or I don't think it's going to be postmarked by the post office unless she goes up to a teller and clerk and says, get it with your stamp.
Okay.
How do you know the day it's mailed?
Well, one thing we'll know when we get it, if it's received before
how do you
deadline.
know if it's mailed before the end of the election day?
Well, statute's pretty clear. If there's no postmark for whatever reason, 10 ILCS 5/19-8. So each postmarked by, each vote by mail voter's ballot that is mailed to an election authority absent a postmark or a barcode usable with intelligent mail barcode tracking system, but is received by the election authority after the polls close on election day and before the close of that period for counting provisional ballots, the 14 days after the election, shall be endorsed by the receiving authority with the day and hour of receipt, open to inspect the date inserted on the certification. And if the certification date is election day or earlier, and the ballot is otherwise found to be valid under the requirements of this section, is counted at the central ballot. So the affidavit.
How does the barcode work? I guess that's,
There's an intelligent barcode on it, and the post office can tell when it got to their facility.
and that, do you access that information, or does the voter access that information, or?
Well, there's also, most voters have signed up for the tracking system, and that also can tell when it was received. So, yeah, I mean, there's barcoding on that.
This is the app that you can get on your phone or whatever?
Mm-hmm. But there's also, the post office has intelligent barcoding. Those little tick marks.
Right.
That tells when it goes through the system.
So if I drop mine in a box in Elgin, is the Elgin post office going to scan it and scan that barcode?
They are able to track it from that tick mark.
It sounds as if you could vote late, as long as it makes it, as long as you say that you voted on time, you give an affidavit, I voted on or before election day. If it's
voter fraud is a crime, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
So you're signing an affidavit and lying about it. That's probably not a good decision. But you also, again, you have tracking. So if you're dropping that in after election day, the post office is going to know when it went.
Assuming that I dropped it on election day and then the post office picked it up and processed it that day as opposed to the next day or something. But are the envelopes coming with date stamps on them? I know it's not a postmark, but you know what I'm saying?
Some do.
Some do, some don't. Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure.
Good. Okay, while you're going through the notes, thank you very much. Brian, thanks very much for the presentation. I mean, it is so important and so complex, and it's a set of requirements that's been mandated by state statute. And so, those of us in local government got to do it. Let's see. Who's double checking the 3-person election judge teams? Who double checks that? Who's supervising that? I won't answer my own question.
The clerk's office? I mean, what do you mean by double checking?
So I think that probably the answer to the question is that you're relying on the fact that there are bipartisan, there's one from each major party and then a third person on those teams.
Yeah.
And so that's like a self-policing kind of process in itself, in its structure.
And it's required by statute.
Right. But I mean, we know sometimes the wisdom of statutes, sometimes non-existent. How many teams are there in the county clerk's office? How many of those 3-person teams are there?
It depends on the day. It depends on how much is in there. We have
range?
Well, it depends on what's going on, because there are other teams that can be doing other functions. If more mail comes in, there may be more people reviewing signatures rather than extracting or doing something else.
Can you give me a range of about at the low end on not a less busy day versus when they were coming in at high speed?
One, and it could be a couple. If you have specific questions, you can ask the clerk or actually come witness the process. They're probably doing it right now.
So we don't
Poll
have
watchers are available to do it, to view it if they would like to. So,
but roughly how many of these teams are there, Brian? I mean, roughly. It's a fair question. I mean, is it as many as 10? Trying to get the idea of volume of work for these teams.
It depends on the day.
Of course it does, but I asked for a range. Any, so it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that
I've
question.
said if you have a question that I don't know the answer to, please feel free to come over or ask the clerk.
All right. Okay, so our objective is to dispel misinformation and support the county clerk's effort. Some people have said, complained that, well, you can see through the envelope. I would think that the double fold that went out helps. frustrating, holding it up to a light or that kind of thing. Have you heard that complaint?
I have not.
Okay. So with the postage paid return envelope, generally speaking, I think your answer was that sometimes they're postmarked, sometimes they're not. Was that, did I hear accurately?
Yes.
Okay. So, but when they're received, we timestamp them through the machine here at the clerk's office. So that's really what we're depending on in big piece. The other piece that usually, is done in front of a team of judges, bipartisan judges, is they sign it and date it themselves. The voter signs it and dates it themselves. Is that the? I'm trying to establish. Well, where does the date come from on these? If for those ballots by mail that don't have a postmark on them.
A voter is signing an affidavit when you're signing the back of that envelope.
So we're relying on the voter to put the date on that.
Correct. The voter, with any affidavit, the voter is signing it and putting a date on it.
Okay. And then how do we avoid a double count where someone goes in on either the weekend before or even on voting day who does not surrender their vote by mail ballot? If I have asked for a ballot and it comes out and I don't bring that with me on voting day and surrender that to the voting, to the judge, what's the control in that situation?
Well, we've discussed this at previous meetings. When the voter shows up, the voter has requested the vote by mail ballot. The poll book will show Brian requested a vote by mail ballot. At that point, the voter will be asked, do you have the ballot with you to surrender? If you're saying in this case, the voter says no, the voter didn't receive it for whatever reason, the voter will sign an affidavit indicating that the voter does not have the ballot to surrender and wishes to vote in person. So if you're talking about a bad actor or something that wanted to mail a vote by mail ballot later, well, so if you're voting today early, or if you're voting as late as election day, that ballot, when you cast it in person, is counted. If a ballot comes afterwards, the voter's vote has already been recorded, shows up as voted in person. When that ballot comes, that ballot would not be counted because that would be a double vote. And the voter signed an affidavit, so that you can follow along what happens there.
Good, understood. Is there a list? There's a list of election judges. Is that right?
Yes.
And then is there a list of the 3-person teams that are reviewing signatures?
Call the clerk's office on that one. They could tell you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Those teams are election judges, right?
Yes.
Yep. And I think what you said is 1 or 2 of these teams were running generally.
Yeah, and if there's more, they base
maybe 3
the other rules. Yeah, it really depends. I haven't been supervising them because it's not my job.
Yeah. So agriculture is waiting to begin their 10 o'clock meeting. We have Mr. Lulvis here to talk about the complaint hotline. The Daily Herald had a sanitation article this morning. And so there is I don't know if that's something you've worked on or heard complaints about COVID concerns in, I know I voted over here in the hallway and it's very narrow and there was confusion about who's going to clean the machine and then it's tight quarters. So you got people walking. There's a gentleman walking out when I was walking down that same hall. And because there aren't separate exits apparently there and at Elgin Township office on McLean Boulevard. So you're aware of these concerns that have been raised?
People always have concerns in every election. We take them into account. People have come to the office to talk about them. There have been many meetings with the health department, meetings with state officials, meeting with, commenters that people have. And we've had some good suggestions from the public, and those things help. I mean, we know what the problems are. we've tried our best to handle them with distancing, with cleaning, with different methods, whether you use the wipes, whether you use sprays, whether the UV light. We're doing the best we can with the situation that we have.
All right, so what I want to see if Mr. Lovis wants to, do you have any prepared remarks about the process for the voter complaint hotline? Are you tied into the call center? Do you have staff in the clerk's office?
No, we do not. Every year on election day, we issue a press release, which has been released for this election, as it has been for over 20 years, as far as I recall. It is a direct line to the state's attorney's office in the old courthouse. We are not tied into the call center. We are separate from the call center. We take direct phone calls from citizens, from election judges, from whoever. We refer things to the call center that are within the purview of the, we believe are within the purview of the election authority, the clerk's office. I'll be very brief. There was a request for past action taken by the state's attorney's office. Back through 2012, our records show that roughly speaking at every election, we receive about 20 phone calls. As a general principle, the most common complaints we receive are related to electioneering, changing in ballots, changing of polling places, lines are a fairly common complaint. To my knowledge, there was a question about investigations. As a general principle, we are not an investigatory body. If a criminal complaint comes in, we refer that to the sheriff's office for investigation. Our records indicate, and my memory going back 20 years is, we've never received on our complaint line a criminal complaint. Therefore, I'm unaware of any prosecutions. We certainly would refer it to the sheriff's office if a complaint came in that was criminal. We have not, to my knowledge, referred anything to the sheriff simply because we haven't received a criminal complaint. Our complaints are generally civil, related to sign placement, electioneering, things like that nature. And that's back through 2012. In the middle to late 2000s, there were more phone calls coming in, especially when the clerk's office made the switch from paper ballots to electronic. There was a learning curve there of a few years for people to get accustomed to the machinery. It's common today that people are accustomed to the electronic machinery and like it. But back in the mid 2000s, we did get more phone calls related to confusion with the equipment, breakdowns, and everything like that. But if there's any, I'm not surprised about the criminal end of this. In response to the committee's request, I did do some quick research on this. The electioneering / fraud question that seems to be going around, and a question about investigations. A widely cited database that's in the press a lot, compiled nationwide on criminal actions in elections in the state of Illinois, indicates that going back through 1982, the number of actual criminal convictions for a violation of the election code, there were total statewide for roughly 40 years, 39. When you consider that that's one a year, when you have statewide elections that have got many, many, many millions of votes being cast, I think that there was an article where an Illinois professor was quoted last month on the topic of fraud, that he made the comment that I believe the data supports and our results here support, that there are two myths related to election fraud issues. The first myth is that it doesn't happen. It does happen. And the 39 convictions show that people do things that are criminal in elections. However, the second myth that this shows is that it does not influence elections. None of these convictions were related to a systemic or a group-wide attempt to influence an election or to sway an election with a large number of voters. These were all individual convictions related to double voting or falsifying an affidavit by individuals, not a group attempt. So I think that the professor from Illinois was correct. Okay, it does happen. It can happen, and it can be a criminal offense. That being said, the incredibly small number statewide supports the results that we've had here, that most of the complaints are civil in nature related to electioneering. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
My thing on this is the media says almost consistently to a reporter that election fraud is not widespread, which admits that it exists, but it's not widespread. So murder's not widespread, of course, but it exists, and it's a very serious problem. And I won my first election by, I think, 13 votes. So it doesn't take widespread fraud to flip an election. I've been a poll watcher up in Milwaukee, and in some areas of the country, you might have 3 election judges, but there's not bipartisan staffing of some of these areas, and so they're free to add paper ballots. They know who didn't show up when the bell goes off at 7 o'clock or whatever, and they've got stacks of paper ballots, and I think they can, pad the results, I guess. I think it's possible, which I guess everyone acknowledges that it's possible. But that's my commentary. Chris, did you have questions on Mr. Lovis? No? Okay. Okay. Then I think that's it. We'll let agriculture roll and get the crops out and so forth. I thought that might take a half hour or something. So I think the sanitation's an issue, and I think you gotta, I mean, I'm not saying it's actually unsanitary or you're actually spreading COVID. It's all about perception of the individual, and what my experience and my wife's experience was the kind of the cramped quarters, which I'm sure is because what used to be fine is now under COVID considered cramped. And I don't know that I would want to have moved every election site to a warehouse somewhere. I mean, that has its own set of problems, but I think it's something we gotta keep looking at. No executive session. I need a motion to place reports on file.
Caius move.
Caius moves. Anyone else still with us?
Starrett moves.
Starrett seconds. And roll call.
Copy second.
Copia seconds. It's already been seconded. Thank you.
Allen, Hernandez, Caius,
Caius, yes.
Copy,
Copy, yes.
Silva,
Yes.
Starrett,
Starrett, yes.
Definitely yes. Reports are on file. Any public comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Anything online? Anybody want to say anything? Hearing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
Starrett moves.
Moved by Starrett.
Caius second.
Caius seconds. All in favor say aye.
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 It's unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you.
For everyone online that is waiting for the agricultural meeting, we will need a couple of minutes to reset everything on technology. This will still be the room that is used for that meeting. So if you're staying, just hang tight.
Thank you, Mr. Blair.